In 3, 2. Oh, let's see if that goes on. That's saying we're live. That's saying I'm recording. Woo, here we go. All right, you boys all settled in? Everybody's ready here? All right, today is Wednesday, April 10th, 2024, and this is my little Bible study. And we're winding up our Passover service tonight. Okay, today is the second meeting for this actual biblical Passover that started last Wednesday when the sun went down. We spent last week was a hard one. This week doesn't hurt near as bad because we pulled the Band-Aid off last time, right? And I taught this again, both sides of this in church today, which for me is different. For actually being in a church situation talking about this, it was different for me. But I had fun. It was a good time. I mean, I had a blast. They seemed to be really into it anyway. Hold on, buddy. All right. Now today when we just started, before we get started, I want to do something before the sun goes down because we're here. This is the last day of Passover, and the disciples asked Christ how often should they take communion, right? And what he told them was as often as you meet, okay? But that means according to the old schedule. The old schedule is when they meet at Passover and at Pentecost and at the Feast of Tabernacles, all right? So that was when there was 3 times a year that they meet, so that seemed like a good standard to me. And since this is our first, even though we didn't get a recording for our first official Passover, I got the one from there. None of it's all on the website yet, or on the YouTube channel yet. Eli, son, you need hush. Okay? Shh. All right. But it will be soon. We got a new alarm worked out so I can bring my iPad with me and load stuff up. Alright, so if I want to open with that before the sun goes down. Alright, now this, and the reason I want to do it this way is because I do want to explain things to people as we go. Alright, because there's a lot of people that see these things and they don't understand what we're talking about. Tonight's subject in our lesson is actually this subject of communion, is the big part of it. It's not the only one that we have. Alright, but if you ever need to take communion on your own, you can. Okay? When you need to, because it is a part of the prescription for actually healing and feeling, and being better. Plus, it's also what you'll find out is what you're supposed to do in remembrance of the Messiah. All right? Now, don't get bent around the axle about what your stuff is. It's a symbol anyway, right? Like for tonight, we're just using Welch's grape drink. You get it over at Dollar General, wherever. All right? Don't make more out of it than what it is. A lot of people say it's got to be wine. It doesn't. You have alcoholics that take communion, and they don't need to be consuming alcohol in any amount. Because that could jeopardize everything they've done, even after years and years of sobriety. And it's just not worth it. Like I said, it's a symbol anyway, so just get you a symbol you can deal with. Right? So that's the one for the grapes. Now this right here, this is unleavened bread. We had this at Passover, not this, because Dad made this for us tonight because everything else was hard as a rock.
Serious hardtack.
Yeah, that's right, it was. It really was hardtack. But he made it, he said, I'll just make you up some roast some real quick. He made me 3 big pieces. I said, I don't need that much, but I'll make the sandwich when we're done. Now, the way this goes, here, let's just for Brett. Huh? You want here, over there, you got your drink right there? There, buddy. Right there, it's not water. All right. For tonight's communion service, though, I'm not going to use John, which is what we're going to be covering basically tonight. I'm going to go to Matthew simply because he got pretty straight to the point about this. And after we take communion, then we'll get into the lesson, which actually explains what these things are really tied into between the Old Testament covenant and the New Testament covenant. All right. So we'll begin tonight. Matthew chapter 26, verse 26, or chapter 26, verse 26. That's harder to say than you think. All right, and this is tonight's communion service. Keep it in compliance with the request that keep communion whenever you meet, which is here upon Passover. And here is our last night for Passover, so we'll get this down here before the sun goes down. All right. Now, this is what he said. Now, remember, this is also known as like the Last Supper, if you talk about paintings and things like that, right? But we know this is the Feast of the Firstborn, not the actual Passover night that they were talking about, right? Mama. All right. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and he blessed it, and he broke it, and he gave it to his disciples.
like it.
You like it, huh?
I like a shirt, jacket. I like a jacket.
I said, take, eat, this is my body.
I like a shirt. I like a shirt.
Thank you.
Daddy. I like a shirt.
Okay, hold on, buddy. Okay.
Mommy, I like a shirt.
Hold on, buddy. Okay. Mine's actually chewy. But the other one was hard as a rock. Alright. Now you notice this all came out of one container, but this container is common. Alright, and you set this out, I'm going to drink it when we're done. Alright. But here, we set out what we're going to use for communion. Alright, and we simply ask God to bless it again for communion. Alright, and he said, and he took up a cup, and he gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, said, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the redemption of sin. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew in your Father's kingdom. And that hasn't come to pass until the second advent.
Can I hit your mommy said? Mommy, say hi to mommy said. Okay.
And that complies. I say, don't make too much of it, even out of communion. All right. So now we have this and this. This is what's left over. All right. We simply just take it and put it in the trash with no fanfare.
What did you say, Dad?
But the other half we brought, and that's plain to eat. It's common. It can be eaten among anybody who wants it. All right. And for the rest of it, I'll just drink the rest of this for communion, or for the rest of it, keep my flip going good. All right, now everybody flip over. We're going to change speeds a little bit. Now let's learn a little bit more about what we've done. Like I said, I wanted to get that done before the sun went down, no matter what. All right. Hey, boys, be quiet over there, all right?
Yes, Dad.
Now, this right here, this is, I've got it labeled as a Passover Scroll 2 closing message for Passover 2024, all right? Now, the first week we talked about this, or last week we talked about this, we focused on the first Passover, right? All right, and when we're done with that, we compared it. Actually, we compared it first. I did just the opposite over there. We started in the Old Testament and then worked to the New Testament, which actually works a little bit better, I think, teaching that. But so we understand the difference between Easter, what that actually was, and what the term Passover actually means. All right? And this year, as a group, then we've kept the Passover in accordance with my dad and I. We were talking about it because usually we have a great big Passover dinner, right? But we both agree that it's more important to remember it than the dinner. To remember what happened and remember what was going on. Well, that was the commandment, right? All right. So we were there at the last Passover, so we learned a lot about that. Something I want to remind you of was the Passover sacrifice itself. Remember, they were to take account of everybody that they had and get it exactly down to the portion. Right? And if you were a little bitty house, you and your wife, just got married, don't have no kids, right? You're just supposed to join along with your neighbor, right? With your closest neighbor or whichever neighbor you choose. There was no stipulation in which one, right? But make sure that you had to count for the meal correct. And if there was anything left over, it was to be burned by the next morning. And this wasn't a sacrifice. This was just a way to dispose of a meal that was considered holy. All right. Now, at Calvary, Christ became that Passover sacrifice, right? All right, so to a Christian during the Passover season, the meal isn't holy like it was to Moses and them. That was how they were going to understand the covenant with Christ. We're partakers of it, all right? So to us, even though it's the same meal, it's just good dinner. It's good food. All right, and you're supposed to enjoy the company that comes along with it. Right, that's right. All right, so I don't want people to make more out of it. The same with the leaven. We went through great detail trying to draw out that there was more to it than just about keeping bread from rising in your nation. All right, and the reality was that during the Passover, during any of the feast days, the point is to keep as much sin out of your life as you possibly can. And then we draw the point about the sin that was the leavening of the Pharisees was simply the fact that they're placing doctrines of men way over the doctrines of God simply to make money. And this point ain't over yet. We're going to pick it up with that. All right. So that was last week. That brings everything up. The sacrifice was holy. All right, it was burnt, but it was consumed. All right, that's a very important part. All right, because he's going to kind of change what is going on with the Passover, and that's what we just partake of, right? And we'll get to that in just a minute. All right, we're going to look at 2 Passovers tonight, 2 different ones. All right, people don't realize it, but Christ begins his ministry on Passover. All right, and he goes in the tomb on a Passover. There's only one Passover in the middle, from the time he starts to the time he's in the tomb. All right, and that's the one we're going to focus on tonight. Now, the first miracle, of course, was Jesus turned water into wine in the land of Canaan. All right, and he even told his mom. It was his mom that came to him. It was like, yeah, we're out of water, and well, basically, what do you want me to do about it? And she just kind of, I think it's almost, to me, sounds sarcastic, just kind of pats the surface of whatever he says do, just do it. All right? And of course, he tells them to fill pots with water. All right? And as soon as they get full, he says, now hand it out. And there wasn't the time, they didn't wait. It was just, the pot's full, all right, now hand out wine. All right, so they threw the governor the feast, right? And the governor's like, oh, this is good because the bridegroom compliments him. It's a big compliment, all right? Said, they usually set out the good wine first, and when we're good and drunk, then they bring out the stuff that's not very good. But you waited to have your good stuff at the end, and nobody does that kind of thing. Now notice, these people that are having this conversation, they have no idea the miracle that was taking place. What does it say? But the servants that were in the back that hauled the water said they knew what happened. All right. So the only thing they're going to get out from the front end guests is that they had a good party. It has a good party, had really, really good wine. But them servants in the back, they know that a miracle is taking place. I think that's important because God doesn't do anything to show off. All right, I see all these kind of things all my life. I mean, just God does not show. He doesn't have a need to show off to you or to anyone else. He doesn't do parlor tricks. This was a favor from his mama. The only people that knew that it was a miracle was his mama and the servants that hauled the water. All right? And the party just went on. They didn't stop, draw attention to him, nothing. He just went on with his business. He's smart. He knew what he's doing. He knows that those servants are going to go, and that's going to be even better. Because it wasn't the people who were drunk at the party, but the people who were serving at the party that know what really happened. Right? Man, I think that's very interesting. But this marks, the wedding in Canaan marks the first miracle that Christ does in flesh. All right? Very interesting. Because right after that, then, listen to what it says, is where we're going to pick it up in John chapter 2. Now let me drink some of the grape juice here. That's just good. I don't care what to say. All right. John chapter 2, verse 13. Listen to what this says. And the Jewish Passover was at hand. All right, so we know we're on the 14th day of the first month, as calculated from the spring equinox, right? And Jesus went up to Jerusalem and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves and changers of money sitting. All right, now these oxen and these doves, you got to understand, these were sacrifices, right? Now, if you remember all the way back when you get to Cain and Abel, right? Well, they presented sacrifices at the same time, and God had respect for Abel's, but none for Cain's, right? Well, what did it say? Cain just brought an offering, but Abel brought the firstlings of the flock, right? Well, that cost Cain big time because of that choice. Instead of bringing his first fruits, what he did out of the ground, he just ate them and brushed it off his stomach and went on about his business. But Abel, he brought the firstlings of his fruit. That's why God had respect. It wasn't because he preferred one over the other. It was because of the heart of one versus the other. All right. So he's going to have a real big problem with this because these are just the flea bags, the leftovers, the stuff that didn't quite make the kill yard for McDonald's. It's just the scrub stuff, and it's sitting there in the temple. All right, now you don't know a lot about the temple, but you're not supposed to have animals in the temple. Period. Outer court, inner court, anywhere. All right. Yeah, but here they have them right there in the house of God. But the thing that really gets me, I think that really gets them going, is these changers of money. Right? This is a Greek word, and your Strong's Concordance and your Greek index is 2773. It's kermatitis. All right? It means a money broker. All right? It comes from 2272, which is kerma, which means clipping a bit. Okay? And it comes from 2751, and that's kero, which means to shear. Okay, what these people are doing is they're taking their money, they're shearing a piece off, taking a clipping of it. All right, this is a percentage. Okay, so how's it going? These guys, who do you think these money brokers really are working for? It's the priests of the temple. All right? All right, so here, not only are they selling the sacrifices there in the temple, but they're charging percentages based upon it. They're taking right off the top. I have no doubt they're probably lending money too.
Yeah, sure.
Right? When I'm sure there was a clipping that was attached to that as far as usury, which all goes against God's law. There is no such thing as usury according to God's law. You lend them to your brother freely, he'll pay you back. But he only going to pay you back what you borrowed, right? Right, and then we have a society based on usury. But nonetheless, here you have it right here in the temple. And this is Jesus' first official act, let's just call it, all right? Listen to what it says, what he does. It says, and when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers of money, and overthrew the tables. He said unto them that sold doves, take these things hence, make not my Father's house a house of merchandise. All right, now, buddy, let me tell you something. If you just open your eyes and look around in churches today, they are almost all nothing but houses of merchandise. I mean, and it is a sad thing, and I understand it's how we function. I'm not saying that you don't need money to pay the light bill, but do you really need a mortgage on a $3 million building?
Yeah.
I mean, does Jesus really need another basketball court? How many gyms you got? And I understand there's nothing wrong with having those things, but really, come on. I mean, but then you're selling things. How many people you see on TV? They're peddling a book. All of them just wrote a stinking book when you see them on TV, and none of them talking about the Bible. Talking about their book, talking about the Bible. All right? So here's your house of merchandise, and, just extraordinaire as compared to today, right? Listen to what it says, 17. And his disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. Then answered the Jews and said unto him, what sign showest thou unto us, seeing that thou dost these things? Listen to these guys. I'm sure by now they're starting to hear rumors maybe about what happened in Canaan. So what these guys are trying to get him to do is prove to us. And they ain't asking for help. They're not asking for repentance from sin. They're not bearing a disease that they've had from childhood. They just want a sign. It kind of shows you where their heart is. Enjoy the sign when you do these things. 19, and Jesus answered and said unto them, destroy this temple in 3 days, and I will raise it up. Listen to what it says. Then said, I've got way too many people just bugging me on Facebook. Hold on just 1 second. Let's just watch this. We will put up do not disturb. That won't happen anymore. Now watch this. Fixed that, didn't I? All right. Should have did it beforehand. Now, where was it? Okay, they want a sign for why. Prove to us why and who you are, why you do this thing. Verse 20. Then said the Jews, 40 and 6. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. Right? And verse 20. Then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple and building. 46 years to build a temple. That's a lot of people working on it, right? And wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? 21, but he spake of the temple of his body, and when, therefore, he was risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this unto them, and they believed the scriptures and the word which Jesus had said. So he's doing a lot of stuff with foreshadowing, with intentions, right? And matter of fact, this whole scene we're getting ready to talk about in chapter 6, Now remember, this is the first Passover. All right? Verse 23, and now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover in the feast days, many believed in his name when they saw the miracles which he did. All right? So he's not hiding anymore. He's flat out. He's driven these guys out of the temple, right? Now, the Caiaphas is the name of the freako that's running everything, right? And this dude's just a Babylonian in a dress. His name is Babylonian. It's even funny that the word Easter from our first study is Babylonian, Chaldean. All right? So Caiaphas here, he snuck in around the back gate because he's been appointed by the Roman government. All right, because they don't want a real priest in there because the real priest's got a different agenda than Rome. All right, so they got a phony one sitting in there now. All right, and his actions all prove that he's actually phony. All right, but nonetheless, because of the miracles, he was doing, you can't argue with that. I mean, this man was lame that walks now. They've known him 18, 20 years. A woman been sick all her life. This guy palsy, this guy demon, you name it. He's just clearing everything out. And this is his first year. This is his first year as he goes on, Passover. All right? Now go over to chapter 6, because chapter 6 is completely a year later. All right? So he's had 1 year he's been actively working. And this time he's been in the synagogue regularly, teaching people there in the temple. Same temple he cleaned out earlier. All right, and Caiaphas has not sent his temple back up the way he was making all that money. All right, so that's probably the first thing he did is the number one cause for his crucifixion on earth. All right, because he went into the temple, all right, and he pulled the purse strings of the priest. And he's not going to forget it. Caiaphas is going to grind an axe. Why? Because he's Roman. And Roman not going to let some Jew get away with that. You got to be kidding me. All right, so nonetheless, we see some of the dynamics now. It's political, it's religious, all right, it's spiritual, everything is going on all at one time. But here in chapter 6, now we're a full year later. All right, listen to what it says. Chapter 6, verse 1. After these things, Jesus went over to the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. A great multitude followed him because they saw the miracles which he had done of them that were diseased. This is during that whole year between the last Passover to this one. Verse 3, and Jesus went up into the mountain, and there he sat with the disciples. In the Passover, the feast of the Jews was nigh. We're real close, right there at hand, right? This is day one of Passover, when the sun goes down. It's the 14th day of the first month. All right? And Passover begins when the sun goes down. And Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company coming unto him. And he said unto Philip, what shall we buy bread that these may eat? All right? Now listen to this is what it says. And this he said to prove him. Who? To prove Philip. All right? Why? Because for he himself knew what he would do. So he already knew what he was going to do. So this is sarcasm. All right, let's don't overlook that. I think Christ had a good sense of humor. So he went up to Philip. You got all these people. He looks up, Passover, here come all these people, because this dude's been teaching for a year. He know who he is. This dude cleaned the temple out. This dude been standing in the temple while Caiaphas standing over there with his arm crossed, mad, teaching about the gospel and all these things that were to come. Talking about John and the things that John had taught, and plus some of the old prophets. So they know this guy, right? And now here, we're a full year later, right? Right, then he says, so Philip. So when Philip says, how are we going to feed all these people? I can see Jesus going, oh, what are we going to do? Why? Because he already knew what he was going to do. He already had a plan. All right? Listen to what he said in 6. And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Verse 7, and Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them. Every one of them may take a little. There ain't going to be enough to feed everybody. Everybody's going to be hungry still if you just give what we have, that much money away in bread. They ain't going to feed nearly to feed the 5,000 people. All right? Verse 8, one of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, there is a lad here, just a little boy. All right? And he hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are they among so many? All right, so Christ already knew what he was doing. He already knew this little boy had the bread. He knew. The table's set already at this point. All right, listen to what he says. Verse 10, and Jesus said, make them sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, in the number about 5,000. So the first thing Christ does is put order to the mob. You got a mob coming up. No, stop. Everybody sit down, listen up. All right. Verse 11, and Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were sat down. All right, now that shows you an order. Remember the book of Exodus, what did God say? So Moses, I'm going to tell you, you're going to tell Aaron, Aaron's going to tell the people. All right, it was the same kind of order that he's establishing here. All right, he takes the bread, and the first thing he does is he gives thanks. And then that bread that he has blessed, he gives to his disciples, who in turn give that same bread to the people. And that's the same order that teaching comes down. All right, remember the book of Revelation? That's exactly how it's stated. He got from God to John to the people. All right? And Jesus and sat down, and likewise of the fishes as much as they would. And when they were filled, all right, 5,000 people, 5 loaves, 2 fishes, 5,000 people, they all ate till they were full. And he said unto the disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore he gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with fragments of 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above them that had eaten. All right, so you have what? You got 12 baskets of fragments left after 5,000 have been fed out. That 5 keeps showing up in there. 5 loaves, 5,000. That's that grace number, right? All right. Now, it keeps showing back up. Now, you got the number 12 that's showing up good too. You got 12 patriarchs, 12 apostles, 12 tribes. All right, and they got 12 baskets of food. But at this point, most of Israel scattered abroad, right? But when Christ commissions his apostles, he tells them, when you go out, you go straight to those lost tribes. Well, guess what? That means that's a basket for each tribe that was lost. So he took all the people that was there, and when he was done, there was plenty left over, even to feed the people that most people don't even know exist. Right? There's a big lesson within that. Right? And there's even a bigger one that we'll get to here in just a minute. Right? There we go. Verse 14. And then those men, when they were seeing the miracle that Jesus did, said, this is of a truth a prophet that should come into the world. Right, so they were actually starting to begin to understand, right? When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force and make him king, first, not time, little k, right? He departed again into a mountain himself alone. All right, so it wasn't time for him to be announced as a king, all right? And they're already starting to clamor to try and take him and make him king, because these people, like many of us, wait on that action. The first advent there, the second one is us. All right? In a lot of ways, we're these same people who are standing there waiting and looking. All right? So a lot of this is about us. All right? But it wasn't time, so he just kind of snuck off. It ain't time, no biggie, he's going on. Now, listen to what it says. Verse 16. And when the evening was now come, right, that new day begins in the evening, right? So this starts day number 2. All right, so this is day number 2 of Passover. Everybody hears about these, but they don't ever associate it with Passover. All right? Now listen. Let's see, where was it? And when evening was now come, his disciples went down into the sea, and they entered into a ship and went over the sea toward Capernaum. And it was now dark, right? So we're well into the second day then, because the sun went down. And Jesus was not come to them. And the sea arose by reason of a great wind and blew. And when they had rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the ship, and they were afraid. Gee, I wonder why. See somebody walking out across the sea, that's going to make you a little jumpy. All right? But nonetheless, verse 20, and he said unto them, it is I, be not afraid. Then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at at the land whither they went. All right, now that's cool. That's even like Moses, where he kind of walked into the cloud, and then he's just kind of up top on the mountain. I mean, kind of the same kind of deal right there. All right, so that's day 2. So day 2 of the second Passover of Jesus' mission, all right, is he walking on water. All right. Now, let me tell you something. He knows at this point that next year is his last Passover. All right, he won't even see that Passover. He'll be in the tomb on the first day of the next Passover. All right, he knows it. Let me ask you that. Let's just go on with this a little bit farther. Just hold on to that thought, all right? But he knows what's going to happen the next year, all right? So I believe he's probably teaching these lessons in an order and for a reason, so you'll recognize them, and you'll see here in just a minute what I'm talking about, all right? All right. Now, verse 22, and the day following, which now is day 3, all right, 3 days of Passover, and when the people were stood on the other side of the sea, they saw that there was none other boat there, save the one whereinto his disciples were entered, and that Jesus went not with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples were gone away alone. Right. So here we have another group that's showing up. This is not the 5,000. Right? This is another group. These are people that heard about the 5,000. Right? And now they're going to go, oh, let's go out and see what this dude's talking about. All right? Listen to what he says. Now, this is the 3rd day. Now, on the 3rd day of the next Passover, where is he going to be? In the tomb. All right? All right. Listen to what he says. 23. How about there came other boats from Tiberias, nigh unto the place where they did eat the bread. Right? They're not going to that place, or close to it, after the Lord had given thanks. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, neither his disciples, they also took shipping and came to Capernaum seeking Jesus. And when they had found him on the other side of the sea, they said unto him, Rabbi, when comest thou hither? And Jesus answered unto them and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, you seek me not because you saw the miracles, but because you did eat the loaves and were filled. All right, you get what he's saying, these guys? He says, you went all the way out here. You can come out. See, that's a neat trick, because God, when he looks at one of his children, he sees what's in their heart. He doesn't see what's on the outside. He immediately sees what's on the inside. And he understands these people. When they come rolling up, they're not there to hear the message or even to see a miracle. They're here because they want extra tartar with their fish sandwich. And make sure I got some fries. I need a Diet Coke, and we need that in 10 minutes. And they're turning Christ into a waiter. And he notices that. He caught that. You didn't come here because you wanted anything real from me. You come here because you thought you could get a free sandwich for lunch. That's exactly what he's telling them. These guys, this is just like the bunch in the temple asking for the sign. That's the same thing they're doing. Well, let's see this again. I want tartar, extra crispy, large curly fries. Something like that. All right? Verse 27. Labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for the meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you, for him hath God the Father sealed. 28. Then said they unto him, what shall we do that we might work the good works of God? Now they're just kind of buttering up to him. All right? And Jesus answered and said to them, this is the work of God, that ye believe on him who he has sent. And now they know they're talking about him. And they said therefore unto him, what sign, here we go again with this stuff, what sign showest thou then, that we may see and believe thee? What dost thou work? You got these guys again. They're here to get a fish sandwich, and now they're just, we'll just take a sign instead. Well, that's gutsy. He had patience, because I don't have that kind of patience. Especially knowing what they were there for. But then you got to step back and go, okay, that's one of his children. He also loves them very much. He's long-suffering with one of his kids. Well, you know the drill. Right. All right. Now, let's see what it say. Where was I? Say this therefore, what sign showest thou then? And it say, believe thee, what dost thou work? 31. Our fathers did eat manna in the desert, as it is written, he hath given them bread from heaven to eat. All right, so he's quoting about Moses to Jesus. Okay? Listen to what he said. Then Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not the bread from heaven. It was called bread from heaven. It was angels' bread. All right? But that's not the bread he's really needing. Right? But my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven and giveth life unto the world. All right, so he's the bread of God. All right, he just said it right there. So we get confused on communion, right? Now think about that. With communion, in the Old Testament, the Passover sacrifice was consumed. All right, here, he's the bread. And in communion, you're still consuming the sacrifice. You get the intention? Right? And he names it right there. Verse 34. And said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. Right? And that time is right in the communion, right? Verse 36, but I say unto you that ye also have seen me and believe not. All right? See, they looked right at the bread of life and they came for a sandwich and a sign and a Diet Coke. All right? Verse 37, on all the Father giveth me, or all that the Father giveth me shall come to me, and him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast away. All right? So that means everybody. All right? But that's with a true repentant heart, because you're not going to fool the guy that sees inside of you, just like he saw to these fish sandwich guys. All right? Verse 38, for I come down from heaven, not to do mine own will, but the will of him that sent me. And this is the Father's will which hath sent me, that of all which he hath given me, I should lose nothing, but shall raise it up again at the last day. All right? That's when he returns. Now they're already risen. He's talking about these people that have passed on. All right? And they're already raised in incorruptible. All right? And in the last day, they return for that last spiritual day as a part of that army that returns with Christ. Right? He's going to say it again. And this is the will of him that sent me, that every one which seeth the Son and believeth on him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. It's repeated twice for emphasis. 41. The Jews then murmured at him. Now, this is the same bunch from the temple. All right? They're scribes, probably more than anything. And said, I am the bread of life which come down from heaven. And they said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he saith, I come down from heaven? See, they don't know their book, do they? That's right. He just made a common statement that's common for all of us. Now, it's specifically talking about him, all right, but that general statement that he came down from heaven, that's everybody. All right, that's what he said. Let us make man in our image. He was talking him and us, both. All right, and here's that image speaking in this book. Let's see. 42, and he said, and they're also getting on to him right there. These people from Nazareth, them just hillbillies up there, okay? That's what they're saying. Them just country folks. We know his mama. We know his dad. You know his brothers. How can he say then that he's the bread that comes down from heaven? And so they're asking some questions. And even Christ will address this in another place. So he said, you're a prophet everywhere you go except your home, in your hometown. Then you're just the guy that burnt the eggs that one time on Christmas, or, Yeah, the silly stuff that everybody knows their family for. Because everybody got silly stuff and everybody does it. And everybody has a family that says it when they do. But anyway. All right, verse 45. It is written in the prophets, and they shall be all taught of God. Every man, therefore, that hath heard and hath learned of the Father cometh unto me. Not that any man hath seen the Father, save he which is of God. All right? Well, okay, because if you're not there with God, you're in your flesh body, and if you see God, you ain't in your flesh body anymore. All right, because it can't inherit the kingdom of God. All right, and that's what he's getting at. All right, he has seen the Father. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me hath everlasting life. I am that bread of life. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. All right, and man, that bread did nothing for them boys. All right, every one of them's passed on. They ate a lot of it. For 40 years they ate of it. And it didn't do one thing to prolong their life. But he's saying, him, the bread of life, of that'll give you everlasting life, is what he's getting at. All right, verse 50. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. Right? I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. I am the bread and the bread that I will give is my flesh. That's why he said, this is my flesh, I give it for you, when he broke the bread. Right? Which I will give for the life of the world. And the Jews therefore strove among themselves, saying, how can this man give us this flesh to eat? Then Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you. I don't know why they couldn't make that connection, because they should have been able to make a connection with the Passover lamb. But I don't understand. But they just don't. They're just not. There's a lot of people that don't make kind of connections like. And sometimes I don't. I mean, I remember studying stuff 10 years later, and you finally you understand something that made it clear. And it just goes on and on. But nonetheless, but Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, except you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whosoever eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood have eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. Again, reported again for emphasis. Again, that is the exact description and example of the communion service that we opened with tonight. That exact same thing. So he's saying, buddy, when you need help, take communion. It don't have to be you don't want to take it every Sunday when you walk in church, because then you take it 50-something times in a year. Yeah. All right, and then this doesn't mean anything. It's just something you do when you go to church. Yeah. But if you do need it, well, there's no secret now how to do it. All right, it's real simple. All right, verse where was I? Oh yeah, 55. For my flesh is the meat indeed, and my blood is the drink indeed. And he that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, I in him. As the living Father hath sent me, and I live by the Father, so he that eateth me, even he shall live by me. This is that bread which came down from heaven. Not as your fathers did eat manna and are dead. He that eateth of this bread shall live forever. These things said he in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum. All right. Now here's where I want you to put your, we got enough time to finish this up. Here's where I want you to put your thinking cap on just a little bit, all right? Okay. He knows. He when he did the miracle of Capernaum at the wedding, all right, he knew he was on the clock when he started that. He knew he was going to have 3 years from the time it started. He even told her, my time's not yet, but he did it anyway. And then he went down, and as soon as Passover started, boom, cleans the temple. Right there. Cleans it out completely. All right? So, that's an interesting little thought right there. All right, now. Okay, so this the second one then, all right? The first thing he does is we have the teaching with the 5,000, right? Where he feeds everybody in ample, and there's plenty for even those that aren't there that are scattered out into the world. All right? The second day of Passover, he walks on water from land out to a boat. Okay, a major miracle. But it seems kind of weird. But then you have this teaching here about the bread of life. Now that's the important one. That's the big one. That's the one that nails down the symbols for communion. Tells you who he was, what his mission, how it ties to God. All these things are done right here on this Passover in those first 3 days. All right. But he knows when he starts teaching on those first 3 days of the second Passover that the next one he's going to be in the tomb. Okay, now listen to what it says. All right. Because I think what he does is he repeats these 3 days while he's in the tomb. All right, listen to what it says. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 17. For it is better, if the will of God be so, that you suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing. Right? You're going to suffer. If you do good, you're going to suffer if you do evil. All right? The only difference is if you suffer for righteousness' sake, there's a reward. All right? If you suffer for evil's sake, your only reward is death. It's a real simple one, right? Right? Listen to what it says in verse 18. For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust. All right, he didn't sin one time, but he paid the price for everybody who repents of their sin. All right? That he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. All right? So as soon as to be absent from the body is to be present with God. Same for him. As soon as he bows his head and dies on the cross, he's no longer here. All right? He's present in his realm. All right? Now, listen to what it says. By which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison. This is a spiritual prison. Okay? Now, people are just going to get all boggled up about this, but we've studied this before. Remember Luke chapter 16 when we're talking about Lazarus and the rich man? Now listen to what it says in chapter 16, verse 25. But Abraham said, son, remember. Now he's talking about Lazarus. He's talking to the rich man. Lazarus, remember who Lazarus is. He's this beggar who had only dogs to lick his sores and begged from scraps from this guy's table, from the rich man's table. Well, buddy, when they both die, well, the rich man's, he's not doing so good. He's sucking wind in one spot. And while the beggar Lazarus is right there with Abraham and all those, and he can see them, and they're having a good old time, and they're happy to see each other, and he's quaking in his boots. That's right. Now check this out. Listen to what it says. All right. But Abraham said, son, because this is what the rich man says. Remember, thou in thy life receivest good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. And besides, all that is. So he's saying he wants, remember, what did he say? He wants him to go back and tell his brothers, right, about this place. This is what it says. And besides that, all this betwixt us and you, there's a great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. Now, this great gulf is fixed. It's Magus Chasmus Sterizo, all right? Megas, you've heard this a lot. Mega structures, mega engineering, any of those megas. All right. It means we usually say big. It can be big or strong. All right. But the chasma, all right, it just means an impassable interval. All right. Now sterizo means literally to turn resolute in a certain direction. All right. So with this great chasm, or this great gulf of fixed, this Megas Chasma Sterizo simply means that it's a big, impassable interval that you literally turn resolutely to one direction or the other when you encounter it. I mean, because, brother, you're not going across it. Now, the things you can get from this is they're close enough that they can hear, they can see, they can identify each other, so it's not a lot of ways this way. But it's powerful. Whatever you can't cross the barrier. Right? Now listen to what it says in Luke chapter 16, verse 27. Then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send, this is back in making look, that thou wouldest send me to my father's house, that I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they come into this place of torment. And Abraham said unto them, they have Moses and the prophets. just like all the rest of us. All right? That Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, nay, Father Abraham, but if one went back unto them from the dead, they would repent. And he said unto them, if they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. And one did raise from the dead. All right. Now check this out. We already know he went, okay, so there's your prison, the spiritual prison, right? Okay. So the first day he's in the tomb. What does he teach? He has the 5 fishes with the 5,000, right? So that's a big feeding. That's a big thing. But the second day, he walks on water. He does something that's impossible. He goes from one side to the other side. Okay? And he's the only one that can do that, unless you walk with him like Peter did. Okay? So that's just like that. The walking on the water is just the same as moving from one side of the Gulf past the Megas Chasmasterizzo into the prison where he preached then. But what did he preach? Well, he preached about the people who come for the wrong reason, or why they're over here on this side of the prison, right? Things like that. He preached. What else did he preach? He preached all the things, the good news, everything he went. So he said he went to the prison to preach the gospel. It was through that. Well, I bet at that point then that the whole thing emptied out. So you see here in this parable then, these are the people that repopulated that side since then. So it didn't by all means stay empty, but the people that were on that side before the Christian era got the same chance to repent under the same conditions that we do. And that makes that fair. Yeah. And so I'm sure that prison emptied out then.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, there were plenty more coming behind it to fill it back up. But either way, it was done. I just thought that was an interesting parallel between the Passover, where he's really in full form, and then his last one, what he does those 3 days. Yeah. I think it's just, it doesn't really mean anything, but I do think it is interesting because, like I said, he knew what he was going to do. So he's going to teach these people this Passover. He's going to teach the people on the other side of the Gulf the same information, because that's the stuff about him being the bread of life and all that stuff. But anyway, okay, hey boys, stop it. All right, that concludes the second of the second Passover, and then of course the third one. We know how that ends. Right? He's in the tomb at the same time. All right. Now I think that's probably enough this year on Passover. Next year we're not going to teach the same set because we have this, so we'll get a little bit farther. But I wanted to establish this as just for my little Bible study doctrinal kind of sake that the Passover we do observe it. Now, when it comes to having other feasts, that's fine, but just the commandments don't forget these. So any other ones you have along the way are just fine and dandy. Just don't forget the ones that are important. All right, and that concludes this Passover, this second Passover, the message for 2024. And then next week, we will be probably back in the book of Revelation. I got a little bit more work I need to do on that if I remember where I left that off before Passover started. Because I've taught this over and over now a couple times. Yeah. But so we'll get right back on. We'll finish up. We maybe got 2 probably sittings more for book of Revelation and we're done. I definitely don't want to blow the back half of that off because we're getting into the new heaven and earth age. There's plenty of things that we can dig out about it and understand a little bit more what it's like. Yeah. Because that is actually your reward.
Cities, there's all kinds of stuff.
That's right. There's all kind of stuff between the different bodies and things like that. But anyway, but that's it. You guys have a good night. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Dad.
You're so welcome, my boy.
Oh my gosh, my legs. It is
Well, I like it so.
Wait, hold on, buddy. Hold on.